We had a very short period of time to discuss very interesting matters. We all had a lot of things to share and notes regarding the morning session. Okay, we concluded in a statement that recalls the Communist Manifest. Well, this is our statement. All heritage professionals unite for sustainable development to prevent human disaster, resist by collecting first-hand stories from everyone, address those who forget or never knew their origin in order to cultivate the garden of humanity. Okay. It is obvious that we were very much motivated by one of the first presentations talking about the acting and the culture of cultivating a garden, to be gardeners and not builders. This is the key idea behind this statement, behind reaching the communist origins. This is the key where it all started. We have to note that this is a very difficult and urgent situation, very stressing situation, and we must to think forward, not only for the traditional ways of accepting the stories of people integrated in the societies, but nowadays we have the emergencies arriving, a Europe in a new situation to abolish all the humanity rights, the culture and the origins of the bourgeois class in Europe, the democratic values and the process that consists museums as institutions. And so we have to underline, to give emphasis to this urgent need to collaborate and to unite all museum professionals and in general heritage professionals. So this is our input.
We was talking about lots of things. I don't know if at the beginning we was a good student because we talk about other things. But at the end we wrote 2 sentences. Museums are like kaleidoscopes. Crystal are people, spaces and objects. Curators and visitors are moving them. So we would like to look ourselves like a kaleidoscope, and every time we move the object, the person, and ourselves, it changes the perspective. And the other one, in order to become a kaleidoscope, we need to keep on questioning every time, every moment, to question ourselves who we are and what we want to tell. That's it.
So we focused in the strategies to talk about these issues, and so we made like 2 huge strategies. So talking about the power of fluidity, of continuous migration throughout history. So talk about former migration to connect people with contemporary migrations and to increase empathy mostly. And then museums should develop strategies to engage audiences that represent the opposite way, because sometimes we talk all the time with our partners, with our buddies, about what we think and what we believe. And usually we don't have strategies to engage people that are the opposition, people that vote on Trump, people that are racist, people that have problems with diversity. And so we have to think about these audiences, and we have to think about strategies of people that are not interested in what we are talking with us. We're talking here. So I think that's one way. Thank you.
We were very influenced also by the idea of fluidity and idea that came that museums as citizens, they have to be citizens themselves. So 2 ideas are museums must become, not be, engines of active citizenry, connecting government, migrants and society to accept diversity and create positive change. So that they have a mandate to really act and connect people vertically and horizontally. It's not only like talking to other communities, but connecting to the powers to be and then demanding and making things happen and following up and making sure that change actually happens. So that was a big idea for us. And then as a starting point to get to this point would be, as a starting point, museums must critically reflect and deconstruct their narratives and recreate new multi-perspective narratives. So that was inspired by all the approaches of multi-narratives that we heard here. Museums are not neutral at all in the way we see it. We'd like to see museums as citizens, museums that are activists, and that are there to empower, but also, as Marilia was saying, to connect people that have different views, to acknowledge that people have fears and that they have resistance to many things that we're fighting for. And it's not good enough to say, you're not right, because that's not being a citizen. So the point of actually creating peace and understanding and integration is that we hear everybody, acknowledge everybody's different points of view, and then come together to find a shared vision that can move forward. So that's basically us.
Our team discussed mainly 5 major issues. First strategy was being mediators and mediation in general, and not building but gardening as a strategy. So we thought that doing something with communities, including migrants, is better than doing something about migration or for migrants alone. And we really liked the practices of the projects presented today because many of them were lower budget projects and they were focusing on temporary practices. So temporality is something very important. The second strategy was going to them and not expecting them to come to you. So we really found this strategy very important. Another strategy was active collecting. Actually, our team was interested in discussing further the importance of contemporary collecting people was an interesting case that we can discuss. So how we can relate this with participatory collecting practices or collecting of movements, social movements and protests. So this is something that requires further attention for us. Mobility of people and community was something that we underlined as it was presented in the Kreuzberg Museum's case, because normally traditional community work focuses on people who have been there for a long time, but now we are working with people who are there maybe just recently. So this is the changing nature and structure of the museum work and worth to underline for us. And we are curious about knowing more or hearing more about the context of all these projects presented, because it's very difficult for us to understand if they happened thanks to some individual efforts or ongoing NGO practices and works, or is it because the local authority already has an understanding or mutual agreement with communities? We don't see it as it is presented today. So maybe the platform can focus on that cases and give us a perspective about it, because it's difficult to understand how we will convince local authorities, for example, or other authorities to develop similar projects or this type of understanding. So that was the summary of our discussion. Thank you.
We've had so many good ideas and strategies today. For us, it was quite hard to include them all in one sentence. So in the end, we made it very brief. But we concluded that in order to create productive dialogue between migrants and local communities, we need to build mutual understanding and respect. A museum with a non-authoritative approach, with an open mind to different interpretation of its collections, will contribute to the successful integration of migrants, which should be in the end of the day, should be the key to that. Co-creation is the key concept.
After having a long discussion about the very identity of the museum, It's tried to express personal stories and the point of view of these stories. We concluded that the most significant requirement in the effective community outreach is creating interdisciplinary and intersector gatherships. Basically, the museum has not just to stand in the middle of these stories and in creating and projecting these stories, but creating the space to host the different collaborations and the different stories.
We were inspired by all the speakers and all the videos we saw this morning. And we reflected about the community of migrants, but not only. We thought about other communities. And we tried to express it in this sentence. The ideal museum is an open and safe place in which different individuals and communities can interact by sharing and exchanging skills and knowledge. And we stressed the word safe, a safe place in which people can feel safe. That's all.
A really profound dialogue, and we discussed about the ways where we can bring the gap between immigrants and the local communities. And we discussed a lot of great ideas and strategies that we can do that. But for writing those 1 or 2 sentences, we had a difficulty, and we found our solution with the brainstorming technique, where each one of us proposed, or actually said with no thinking, without thinking, what's the word that best describes, or best describes what he feels about all this seminar that we were today. And from those words, we created this one. Sharing experiences to discover diversities and bonds, because we want to have shared beliefs and cultural things, but at the end of the day, each one of us is different, and we have to respect our diversity, but also our equality. Furthermore, fostering co-creating practices in multicultural societies by engaging all ages, starting from children. The aim target here is to focus on the youth also, because the elder people are most unlikely to change their attitude. So we have to restart and make projects on the youth in order to have, in 20 years, I don't know, grown-ups that share the common beliefs that we all together here stand for and talked about. Thank you.
Are two sentences, as you can see here. One is museum on the road. We came up with this idea inspired by all the ideas that you presented here before. Our team thinks that we need to have museums which travel in the city and come and find the visitors instead of having the visitors come to the museum. The museum must travel like a moving van and collect the stories that people have to give and share with other people, and connect people in communities, not only with immigrants, but with each other too. Our second idea, immigrant stories have no territories. Museum changes lives and community ties. And we wanted to be collaboration and creative. Yes. The second idea came from the need to connect people and their stories with the museum objects and collections, and having people sharing the stories as they're inspired from the object. And because we have an artist on our team, we also have an illustration. We imagined the museum as global, as the whole is. The museum is the air, moves around and changes, and people can come into the museum and change, becoming happier and full with new experiences and emotions, and are more inspired and motivated to share their stories and move around and meet more people and connect with more people, foreigners or not, strangers or not, immigrants or not. Thank you very much.
To summarize a little bit what I heard from all of you, and I will need your help as well, because I will try to make it very, very simple, although it's much more complicated than we all know. I think what we managed to do in these 10 teams is to produce a manifesto for museums, perhaps more or less on the same line of thinking as Leicester University did 3 days ago, and they produced those 6 points, six principles for museums. So we have a manifesto expressed from the first team, and we'll have to look at it and how we can phrase it and make it even more known everywhere. You discussed strategies, going further from the manifesto, strategies of how museums can do the mission, can fulfill the mission. You also imagined the museum as a space. So we have the physical space of the museum, but also as an imaginary space of connection and humanity. And even the museum as a moving planet, I would say at the end. This is what I noted from the drawing. The museum as a moving planet, moving because it moves, moving because it moves us, moving because it creates emotions, all these things together. I think also we made a point about citizens and their different type of manifesto for citizenship, what citizens should learn. It's not only what museums must do, but also what citizens must do, because museums cannot do everything by themselves. And they are not like the didactic spaces that we need for education only. Citizens must co-create with museums. There was also reference to two important concepts, the context and the process. So, and we know that this is very important as we develop the project. We need to record the context of each project's development. Because you're right, I've seen, and your team, it's very important to know the specifics of each project, what gave it shape, or sometimes what they didn't give a shape to a project. Because often we don't have projects realized. Not because they were not in their people's minds, but because of the difficulties they faced and the processes all along the line. And I liked very much this phrase, immigrants' stories do not have territories. I missed the second phrase, the second rhyme, but you can perhaps repeat it. I think we can use a lot of the key phrases that we co-created in order to make something very powerful out of this meeting today and make it more known.
Let me, since you give me the opportunity, make 2 points. The one is that most of the teams and as a whole, we discuss about how to change and behave as museums. So this is already the advantage of dealing with the problem with different people, that you start trying to renovate your own self and start the change by yourself, not by, through them. That's one point, that already it is successful for you. And this is because of the field that you are in, which is a field of freedom. You are, it is from your initiative that we are trying to do that. Nobody asks you to deal with the immigrants. It is your own need that you want to do that. And this is very, very important. It is not that you have been given money to do that as a non-NGO or whatever. It is your need to do that. And these are very important points for me. Thank you.